This is Dr. Mark Waller, and joining me is my trusty sidekick, Kristina Black. And today we have a special guest, which I will get to in a moment, but we're going to be exploring, this. Is the mind a doorway or the body a stage? And we're going to unravel the relationship between those with our special guest, Essence Oyos. I'm sorry, I always mess that up, Essence. It's too simple. And can you see your name on the underneath your picture?
Yes.
I want to do a brief introduction because we're going to cover a bunch of things today. I'm really excited about it. First of all, Essence is a veteran of thought watching and the dance of the lion and the unicorn. So we're going to tie the awakening experience into this. And the other thing that's very interesting here is that Kristina is a craniosacral therapist, and Essence is a myofascial release therapist. And I'm really interested to see how these all tie into the topics today. But by way of introduction, one more thing, and that is Essence, your master's degree is in business administration?
Public administration. Yes.
Public administration. Essence is also a fellow of the Economic Recovery Corps, and she works with Indian tribes in Southern California, and which is a whole different thing that she's very qualified to do. But it's absolutely fascinating, and we may have you tell us a little bit about that work too. So welcome, Essence. Nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with both of you today.
I'm glad you're here. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Thank you.
So Kristina and I have been wanting to do this for quite some time because she and I have been bantering back and forth this whole relationship between the mind and the body.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you who listen to the channel know that I'm very much a mind guy. I'm just everything I do is about thought and emotions and all that stuff. Kristina is very much a body person and accesses the information through a completely different route.
Mm-hmm.
In Essence, you've been doing myofascial for 15 years?
Oh my gosh, 21 years of my 26 as a massage therapist.
Wow, 21
so
years.
Cool.
Good grief. So you both bring a lot of experience with you. So why don't we just start there? Essence, could you just tell me about your experience with the thought watching, what it did, how it worked, and anything on that background that may have enhanced your life, since a lot of the people that watch the channel want to know about thought watching and the benefits and so on and so forth.
Sure. Yeah. First, I'd like to just acknowledge my myofascial therapist because she is the one who recommended I get your book.
Oh.
Several years ago. And so when I gave myself permission to actually read the book, it opened up so many pathways for me to sort of understand at a much deeper level how I work and how I have worked and how what hasn't worked for me in the past came to fruition. And so my undergraduate work is actually in psychology, so everything that I learned in that pathway for neuropsychology and abnormal psychology and all of those things created sort of a foundation that enhances the body work and vice versa that I've done for the last 26 years. But also, once I read the Lion and the Unicorn book, the way that I describe it is it took all of this information that I had gleaned through the years and experiences, and sort of wrapped it all up in a perfect bow that was like this gift that helped me understand, what was holding me back in my relationships and in my work and in my relationship to myself and my own healing process through the
So
years.
you're referring to The Dance, the Lion, and the Unicorn, which is the book on the left. Anybody interested, there's going to be a link in the description. So, yeah. And
Yes,
The
so
Dance of the
cool.
Lion and Unicorn, by the way, has been validated now by research. In the research, they call it demand withdrawal. And what they found in couples was that one party is the demander, and it's at an emotional level, and the other party tends to withdraw. And therefore, lions and unicorns, it fits the pattern. But I digress. Go ahead.
It just provided a whole new world for me to understand not just my partner relationships, but also my relationships with my children and my sibling and my parents. And I'm fortunate enough to have such good relationships with all of those folks that we can dialogue about the things that come up. Oh, whoa, I just caught myself being a unicorn there for a minute, and hey, there's the lion in you. And we're able to talk about it in a
Okay.
meaningful way that helps our relationships grow.
It's cool.
Great.
That's so neat.
So when did the thought watching then come into it, just out of curiosity?
Oh my goodness. Probably really when I read the book. I have so many highlights in that book when I read it, and I think I devoured it in less than a day when I
Wow.
actually gave myself
Wow. You read
the time
Mastering
to
Thought in
get
less than a
through
day.
The Lion and the Unicorn in
Oh,
less than
Lion
a
and the
day.
Unicorn.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah, and it has so many highlights in there, like, oh, this is that part, from 20 years ago when I made that mistake of taking something personally that I shouldn't have, and I just wanted to run away. And so I was able to connect the dots with the examples in the book with some of my own personal experiences that was just so eye-opening.
It's funny. When I wrote the book, I shared the manuscript with some of my clients, and I was accused of eavesdropping on their conversations.
I think
And
you've
I
been
said,
listening.
no, everybody talks like this.
This is people.
So,
Very
okay.
powerful.
So that's incredible. Now, when we talked the other day, you were describing an experience that you had, and I love the way you described this of taking the helmet off. And I wanted to get back to that because the way you described it was so unique and right to the point.
And is a really good tie-in to the body work, too.
So
Yeah.
go ahead. When were you
So,
aware that you had a helmet on and you took it off?
well, to be honest, the the work in the Lion and Unicorn was really compacted in my previous relationship that is no longer, and it was through the process of um, my own sort of meandering what comes next after a long-term relationship that sort of opened my eyes even more to the fact that I had been donning or wearing armor, a suit of armor for a very long time, that protective layer, which really ties into the whole, unicorn sort of let me just vacate to avoid. So I had this protective armor on. And, I had some friends right through the separation process say, "Wow, are you losing weight?" And I said, "Yeah, I've gone down about 40 pounds here, and I feel like I've lost this suit of armor." And one person said, "Well, that's funny because armor does weigh between 35 and 40 pounds." So
Wow.
of course, my curiosity, I went and looked it up, and the image that showed up was a full suit of armor with I don't know if it's called a helmet or not, but the headpiece that they had to wear back then weighed like 10 pounds and had this tiny little slit right where they could, so they had to turn their whole body to see what foe or enemy was coming up their way. And so this tiny little strip in the helmet is what I paid attention to the most, because I felt like with the removal of the armor that the helmet came off and suddenly my vision just expanded exponentially. And it tied into when I read the book and was able to go, oh, I did that. Oh, there's an area that I can grow there. So with the removal of the helmet, my vision expanded even more so. And like I got a broader view of the connection between Lion and Unicorn and all of those episodes and moments where I was, trying to please dad or trying to, not get in trouble with mom. And
Right.
so it broadened the vision that much more.
I want to ask Kristina about her awakening, because this reminds me of her experience. But when you described that, when we were talking the other day, that narrow little slit in the helmet, of course, you're describing an emotional defense, a whole defensive system. But we talk a lot about the limbic system on this channel, and the limbic system controls our perception. And it has a narrow little perception and only is able to see, literally one thing. So when you described that, I instantly knew what you were talking about. It was just such a beautiful metaphor. And it reminded me to ask Kristina about her awakening experience and how that ties into what Essence is kind of describing.
Is there like a certain direction that you had in
Well,
mind? Can you give me a clue?
remember the morning when I'm sorry, I'm setting you up again. I'm remembering the morning you woke up and you stood aside and you could see what your ego was doing. It kind of
Yeah.
reminded me of the same thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think when you experience the the removal of something that you're very used to, it's very easy to compare and contrast, because my whole life I had been one way, and then all of a sudden that morning I could just see everything so differently. And it really helped me to understand what that part of my brain does and wants to try to do, and that I have the choice to let it or not. But yeah, I mean, I began to almost see my limbic system as like a mischievous character, that it was like always scheming and crafting and like just wanted what I wanted. So I thought just enough to like be on board, even though like some parts of it were like unfortunate or like whatever. And then all of a sudden it was just so clear that this was not my friend in this moment. And that like even with the best attempts, like I don't really want it to be the one controlling me. So yeah, I don't know. Is that helpful?
I think it's very analogous. Can you relate to that, Essence?
Entirely. Yes.
Yeah.
So but it is almost like taking off a helmet. That's kind of the way it feels.
Yeah. Well, and why I was saying it relates back to the body work too, is that it was you paying attention to your somatic experience, Essence, through that conversation that got you to have more awareness of like this area of your body, and that triggered a whole psychological thing. And that all of a sudden now you had probably pulled yourself out of fight or flight, which is like why your tunnel vision went away. And it's like perfect with your analogy of the helm. And it's so cool. And sometimes we need that body piece. Sometimes it's not complete without having the somatic work or consciousness about, awareness of what's going on with the somatic experience.
So how do you relate to what she's saying, Essence? She's saying, did you have a body experience at that time?
Oh, yes. Well, going back to my own myofascial therapist being the one who introduced me to the Lion and Unicorn book, I really was committed to myself to take care of myself during that chaotic time period by going and getting the treatments that I needed so that I could, stay in my body through all of it. And so while receiving the body work, we would discuss, well, that's the lion and that's the unicorn. So what does that feel like in the body? Not just in thoughts, but if I would get stuck in one area, if like, for example, if my shoulder was stuck and not wanting to move very much, there was a dialogue there between us, and oftentimes the lion and unicorn dynamic would come up during those sessions too. So that somatic piece of it is absolutely there because we talked about the other day, the mind and the body are really one thing.
Yeah.
Well, and when you go back and kind of study the literature on people who've experienced an awakening or enlightenment or whatever, there's always this feeling of lightness of being. So clearly the body is involved in the experience.
That's a good point.
So now let's stop for a second. I just want to redefine some things. So, because it's interesting to me, I've had cranial sacral. Kristina did some of it on me. I've not had myofascial, but could the two of you just kind of set the framework here, what the difference is between those two treatment modalities, and then we'll get back into this mind-body thing some more. Essence, give us the definition of not just the philosophy, but the actual experience of myofascia. What happens when you get the treatment?
Okay, sure. So I'm trained in the specialized modality of the John F. Barnes method of myofascial work, which is gentle, sustained pressure into the connective tissue. And the connective tissue is the fascial system, which runs uninterrupted head to toe, three-dimensionally, front to back. And when there are restrictions in the fascial system, it can apply up to like 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure on nerves and muscles and,
Veins,
blood vessels and the lymph system. And so in the scientific community now, they're calling it the extracellular matrix. So the fascial system truly is the entrance to the cell, sort of the cell membranes, and it's how the body communicates within itself in all systems.
So if I get a treatment, I'm laying on a table,
Maybe.
Right? Oh, okay.
Might be sitting, you might be standing. Yeah.
And then you're applying pressure at certain points. Is it anything like acupressure at all?
No. In that, so it's sort of a therapeutic art in the way that we're taught.
Okay.
We learn techniques, but we also learn that if we know what we're doing when we walk in the treatment room, we don't know what we're doing because each human being is so different, and their experiences are different, and their holding patterns and their injuries too. So each person is unique, and so there is no sort of prescription or recipe to doing a myofascial treatment. We would do a brief evaluation to see how they are posturally, standing and laying on the table, and based on what we're seeing and what we are feeling their body needs, it determines where we start. Sometimes it might be in a seated position. Sometimes it might be standing. Sometimes it might be on the table, laying down.
But is the idea to unblock something?
The idea is, well, now that's funny. Yes. This is 21 years of doing this. I'm like, well, it's different for everyone. And yes, we're looking for the restrictions
Okay.
in the body that are stopping the flow of energy and fluid through the body. So the way I like to describe the fascial system, and John Barnes teaches this too, is that it's hollow fluid-filled microtubules of light. So it literally is like the fiber optic network of our entire body. And one time our Verizon guy came to the house and was like, oh, you're not getting internet because somebody stole your light. And I was like, well, I thought that wasn't supposed to happen. Like, so you're saying if we have an earthquake and the fiber optics break, we won't have internet at all? And he goes, no, that's never going to happen. So it's kind of the same thing where if there's a restriction, if somebody has an injury, say falling off a bike or a surgery, and the surgeons
Okay.
have to cut into the connective tissue, it breaks the ability of the light to flow through. So we're aiming to soften those restricted areas to allow
Okay.
fluid and light to continue flowing through, so messages can
So,
get to where they need to
so
go.
one last question. So you have a clue as to where to look because there's been some kind of something that focuses your attention on a particular area. Is that correct or not?
It can be. It can be. So, we will have them fill out their intake forms, and
Okay.
I'm this pain and that pain, and this is where I'm feeling it here. But in this work, we look for the cause of the symptoms, not just treating the symptoms. So if somebody's having shoulder pain and they're rotated forward, it could actually be coming from a misaligned hip.
Sure.
And those restrictions that are causing the misaligned hip might be down the leg.
So
Everybody's
you've got a clue where to look. You've got some kind of there's some kind of a roadmap at least.
Sure. And everybody's roadmap is completely different. Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
sometimes it might be energy. Maybe their breathing pattern is shallow in one area. So we would kind of do a scan in that area. If there's heat coming out of that area, then that area needs to be treated. And so what we look for in the body is if the tissue is hard to the touch and rigid, or if there's a lot of heat coming out of it, or if there's tenderness to the touch.
Okay. So if you're listening to this, don't judge me. I'm entirely ignorant about all this stuff. So Kristina, by contrast, how does that differ from cranial,
Sacral.
the work that go ahead.
Yeah. So craniosacral is a nervous system therapy, and it's like Ordrin is with the craniosacral system. It's a waterproof system that wraps around your brain and whole spinal cord, and it's the interface between your brain and body. And so everything that happens goes through the craniosacral system, but also you're also working with the nerves quite a lot. And sometimes it can go into psychological like things, and sometimes it's just body work. And it's kind of like it is a hands-on, close-on therapy. And most of the time it is laying, but it's not restricted to that if someone needs something else. But very similarly, we're sort of starting a session with getting a read on the body and then going hopefully where their body says. Sometimes people say, will you please work on my arm? And you got to like touch their arm, even if it's not coming from their arm, right, Essence?
Yeah.
But when I get to the chance to just follow their nerves, really a lot of great things happen. We'll get into the area. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a very similar situation with what's happening in MFR, where it's like the fascia does loosen up. And listening to you explain it is so interesting, because proprioceptically, when I think that fascia is loosening up, it almost feels like this bloom happens in the body, and like your whole body wakens up and softens. And then if there is emotion or like some sort of memory or thought or anything stuck there, that psychologically, like it'll start to surface and bubble up in their brain, and they may either like get a almost like a movie replaying what happened, or they'll just remember what it felt like to be there, and it gives them a new chance to process what's going on there, and that will continue to soften up their tissue. So the idea is like a healthier body and a healthier mind, and they all work together to make a better you.
So that opens up a question for you, Essence. Then, do you find emotional, psychological things emerge as a result of your work? Then,
Oh yeah. In the simple version, yes, definitely. And in my own healing journey, there through when I attend courses, and also when we do study groups and things like that, where people from all areas come together to practice the work, things will come up for sure. And in my own personal experience, I can say that moving into those positions in space, or having somebody do the body work and finding those restrictions, and oh my gosh, like it's therapeutically painful, and emotions will come up from that, and maybe some memories will come up from that. The instructors will come around and offer guidance, like, give yourself permission to let go of the struggle and find a new way. And for the longest time, honestly, and I have to be honest with this because it is part of my authentic journey, is like, well, how do I choose a different way? And what looking outside myself for that. And I have to be honest in saying this also, Mark, because it was reading The Lion and the Unicorn book the first time where I was like, oh, it was finally that, like, the dots were connected there. That's how I choose a different way. Like,
right.
it's the perception. And so having struggled for many years, not knowing how to do it differently, or how to choose differently in feeling something or thinking something, was a big struggle for me personally. And so yes, the Lion and Unicorn book really, when I say the pretty bow, it was like, oh my gosh, now I feel like I have, you get a toolbox and you're working in your, on your house or something, and all you needed was the screwdriver to take the
Right.
faceplate off of the electric outlet, and you didn't have one. And so I feel like, okay, now I have the screwdriver. For lack of a
Well,
better
my
way to say it, but for my own personal journey, that's how things kind of sort of came together for me. And now I can see things differently with the helmet off. So
right.
I'm able to assist my clients when they come to the table in a different way. And I have recommended your book to them also. It's on my shelf
Oh,
out there in the hall.
I very much appreciate that. So you've segued into the next aspect of this I wanted to talk about, because Kristina has generously shared with me many experiences she's had with people who have had psychological breakthroughs because they've discovered things through the body work. The way I work with people is really a two-step process. Number one is they disidentify from the voice in their head, and that removes the helmet. It's a mystical awakening, literally, that happens. But number two, then the way I access the rest of the work is I tell them that their emotional reactions are tied into their early childhood emotional learning, and I prompt them. It's almost like a post-hypnotic suggestion that they will remember what they're supposed to know about that. And of course, once they, like you said, connect the dots, they're free of it. They realize, okay, I can see how this is happening. But the other day when we were talking and after we got off, I texted Kristina because there are some people that have difficulty remembering things. Now, none of us have very good memory of our childhood, but I mean, even when you prompt the non-conscious mind, sometimes it has difficulty answering. And I wonder if this whole thing could work the opposite way, where I get somebody to that point, and then I send them to one of you and say, go ask the question while you're doing body work and see if the answer emerges through that path. And that was the next thing I wanted to bring up, because it seems like this is a marriage between two different approaches, and it's a tool that I've not used, and I'm sure it would probably work. What's your reaction, Essence?
100%. Yes. I mean, I've experienced that, right? Receiving the body work and the work that you do at the same time. I perhaps was the slingshot for me over the last few years. I mean, and when COVID hit and my business shut down, and like my business was my life, my connecting with the clients in a therapeutic way. And when I couldn't do that work, it rocked my world. But it was maybe a year afterwards that I think I connected with you. And so, yes, absolutely, that process, the combination of the two simultaneously also really was a huge catalyst for me to shatter that armor and take that helmet off. Yeah. Because and my teacher, John Barnes, will say, you don't really have to know exactly what it was, because the body remembers everything that ever happened to it, even before we're born.
Kristina, what's your reaction to the question?
Oh, I also agree. I agree 100%. I think that I have had awakenings of sorts, maybe not as big as the thought watching awakening, but some that came close and other smaller ones. And I think it's a really nice place to be mentally, because when you start getting body work like that, it does bring you into somewhat of a trance. And that's the state at which your brain's ready to rewire. And it's also your limbic system is quiet, and probably your task positive network is on, and the information from your non-conscious will float up more easily. And you can even directly ask questions out loud. Like I could, as a practitioner, say, what does this have to do with early childhood learning? Or what does this have to do with your parents? And in that state, they'll probably have either their body will start pinging somewhere, they'll get sensation somewhere, and that's the clue to start working that area, or their non-conscious will just tell them, and they'll either hear it or see it or whatever. Do they just know it? However they relate to, communicate with their non-conscious. And then, which is also actually a pretty good way to tell in which ways you're intuitive too. By the way, if you see something or hear something or whatever, like if you feel something, that can be a good chance for you to understand how your non-conscious communicates with you. So, but yeah, I think it could be incredibly enlightening and could be the beginning of many times of asking that question, or it could be a one and done. Like you just don't know what the inner wisdom of that person is going to do. But I think if you have the attitude of just being privileged to be there and partner with it while they've honored you with their presence on your table, like it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, because it's exactly what their non-conscious wanted. As long as I show up and are attentive, everything that their body has predetermined they're going to release and process that day, it'll do it.
Well, my experience of this with people is, let's say I'm working with somebody, it's very clear their relationship patterns, their thought patterns, their defenses are all organized around their relationship with their father. Now, what we tend to do is we turn the person we're in the relationship with into the father, but we don't realize we're doing it. And so when I prompt them to, what I tell them is every time you have this interaction with your partner and it brings up this emotional reaction, ask the question, how is this related to my father? And more often than not, within a few days, they have an experience where they literally can see themselves turning the other person into the parent.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's not so easy for people to do. And it makes me think that there's a different path that they could take. And I could send them, to somebody who does, myofascial release or cranial sacral, and going on a different path would open that up and they could see what it was.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I believe the potential's there. Yeah, I think absolutely it can. Yeah.
I believe you. I did do some work with a client who was also a massage therapist and had done a lot of work on herself and with her clients, and so when I suggested that she attend, there's a clinic in Sedona and there's another clinic in a treatment center in Pennsylvania. So when I suggested that she go for an intensive there, the response was, not unless there's somebody to help guide me through the psychological components of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was valid in that situation, for sure. And I mean, yeah, we all need each other, So, I just yes, I think it would be a great partnership. Because it's about the healing, it's about the awakening, it's about the becoming free from those restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a personal funny story to share because even after, this was just a couple of years ago. So after 20 years of doing this work, or 18 years of doing this work, I attended a course and partnered up with, I call her a fairy. She's the most gentle. I just love her, therapist out of Arizona. And we were doing a sacral, like a lumbar release. And the pressure in this work is, there is no measurement to it. It's just meet them where they're at. So sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's skin, sometimes it's deeper. And I found myself bracing. This was before the helmet and the armor came off. I found myself bracing. Oh, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. I have low back issues. I'm telling myself, right? And then I caught myself. I was like, does it really hurt or am I bracing? Okay. So then I kind of played with it a little bit and it was like, oh, when I softened into the hold that this therapist was doing with me, it was like, oh my gosh, I am bracing against the fear of the pain. And it only hurts when I do that.
Interesting.
It was such a profound awakening in that moment too. So often in my daily, like I feel my neck tighten up. Okay, what am I bracing against the fear of something, or
Okay.
do you see where I'm going with that? Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You have a perception something's happening that's not actually happening, and your
Correct.
body's responding to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Until I asked it, right? What do you It was profound. And I've used that almost daily since then.
Well, I was thinking before our gathering today about this concept, is the mind a doorway or the body a stage? And I've often heard it said that the body is the theater of the mind. But I got to confess something. I don't believe there is a mind. There's only two things. There's mental activity and awareness. And there is no third thing called a mind that kind of floats around. So it's, there's mental activity. Some of it's conscious, some of it's not conscious. And so in a way, we create this concept of a mind, which is actually where the whole false self comes from. And in doing so, we negate the importance of the body because, all we have is bodily activity and function and brain activity and function. And then there's something that's aware of all this. But there is no thing called a mind that's floating in a dish somewhere, separate from the whole thing.
I've heard it put that your mind is a combination of the thoughts in your head, the passion in your heart or something like that, and what was it? It was like 3 points along your midline. I guess your gut, like your intuition. Something like that. And those three together make up the system that we would call your mind. But I agree, it's not in a dish somewhere.
Well, the problem with calling it a mind is that what that means then is we are identifying with our mental activity. It's just like the voice in your head. When you identify with the voice in your head, you believe that's me. That's a problem. When you identify with your mental...
Go ahead.
Or by the same token, when you identify with your mental activity and call it a mind, it's another blind alley of identification, and it prevents you from experiencing your awareness of your mental activity as a completely separate experience. So you're always inside searching for this thing called the mind, and you can't find it. It's not there.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
I'm sorry, I went down a rabbit hole.
No, that's a good.
No,
that's
okay.
a good rabbit hole to go down, actually, and it's I love it because I'm hearing John Barnes in my head right now saying it's just a label. Like
Right.
There are medical doctors and RNs and chiropractors and PTs and OTs and massage therapists. Like anybody that has a license to touch can go and learn the myofascial therapy that John Barnes teaches and his instructors. And one of the things that he says all the time is like, throw the diagnosis away, because the definition of a diagnosis, which is just a label, right, is a myopic description of symptoms. And so, somebody will come in with a diagnosis of plantar fasciitis, but it has nothing to actually do with their feet. So we'll go in and treat a misaligned pelvis or a scar underneath the shoulder, and then suddenly the plantar fasciitis is not felt to the extent that it was previously.
Right.
So, and I can't quote them because I don't really follow the scientific journals of things, but whoever they are, quantum physicists, and there's a big congress of fascial symposium that is now happening. I think it's in its 10th year, maybe. So scientists and therapists and practitioners from all over the world come together and talk about the fascial system now, and whoever they are, believe that the microtubules of fluid-filled light is actually where consciousness lives in the body. Because previously, when medical professionals studied the connective tissue in the body, it was like brittle, hard wrapping paper inside the body. So they would, cut through that to get to the good stuff, the organs. And so there were no in vivo studies of living fascia and what its importance actually is. So in some realm, you could say the mind lives in the body because it's out there too. It's kind of like when you're facing a doorway or facing away from a doorway and you can sense that somebody walked in, like you just know it without seeing them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The mind that lives in the body knows that somebody just walked in the door, even though you don't actually know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can sense what's happening outside of your body through different
Right.
means. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But no,
Interesting.
yeah, there is no petri dish of that.
And I agree with your point, Mark, too, about that it's so important not to commit yourself to a label. And one of the things that is just such an amazing example of that for me was I think there was a scary movie called Cracked, and it was about someone who had multiple personalities. And only one of his personalities had clinical diabetes.
Yeah.
They would do a blood draw while he was in that state, and he would have diabetes. And if he was any other persona, he wouldn't.
Right.
And that just shows me the power of the mind and the power of what is possible through harnessing it. And there's studies now where you can even like rewrite your DNA through intention or something like that. Like it's just crazy to think about, okay, if these things can be possible, like what else is possible? And if all I need to do is stop limiting myself, then like I'm open to hearing more about that. I'm open to seeing what's behind that door.
Well, Essence, you've opened a new door for us here today. Before we
Mhm.
before we go, do you want to talk about the tribal work you're doing just briefly and the
Sure.
fellowship?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Kristina, I just have to say, yes, absolutely. That limitation, like all we have to do is give ourselves permission, which can be the hardest thing to do sometimes, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Based
I might
on
have to.
thought watching. I'm not allowed. I'm going to get in trouble if I do that. I just, it's one of
Yeah.
the things that happened for me when my helmet came off.
So
Um,
good.
yeah. So the fellowship that I'm participating in right now, just an amazing opportunity. I had previously volunteered for my tribal community in Northeast San Diego County for about 6.5, 7 years. Uh, to just see if I could affect positive change because for example, the geographic or the data is such that our tribal community is at the 69% poverty level in one of the counties that is the most expensive to live in. So
Wow.
um, I'm secretary of the board of directors of the tribe's economic development agency. And through the work with one of our consultants, uh, participated in a round of interviews and applications um, in a cutting edge pilot program that the Economic Development Administration put out RFP for a couple of 18 months ago, I think. And so I don't know how they did this. I'm just amazed by this, but they took 1,500 applicants for the fellowship and over 500 applicants to be the host community and matched a total of 65 all across the country and in the territories. There's a fellow and host community out in the Mariana Islands, down in Puerto Rico, and just sort of all over the country here. And the the intention of this program is to shake things up and change the way that economic development has been done. From the crash in '08 and when COVID hit, the EDA, the people in the EDA decided that something needed to be done differently to bring support and awareness to Main Street, basically back to Main Street. Like if we came back into the communities and supported the folks that are grassroots doing community work, then what's that going to look like? So it's a cutting edge pilot program, and so I am a fellow, proudly representing and supporting the Mesa Grande Business Development Corporation's agritourism project on the Golden Eagle Farm in Northeast County. And it's been amazing, really, because the language of the myofascial work that I've been doing for so long is the same language that these economic development professionals are speaking. It's refreshing because when we think of government agencies, the man, but it's the people within those agencies that are really working so hard to affect positive change, and the outcomes are already amazing. It's only been 8 or 9 months now, so
Wonderful.
That's so
thank you
neat.
for the opportunity to talk about that.
I'm
It
very
sounds
proud
like a
of
really
what you're
rich
doing.
experience. Yeah.
So
Very
I
much so.
forgot, by the way, I've got my, I didn't set this up right. Sorry about that, but I want to encourage everybody to like and subscribe. We do a lot of interesting things on the channel. And if you want to contact us or have any follow-up of any kind with Essence or Kristina, myself, scan the QR code. Takes you to a form you can fill out, and we will respond right away. Well, Essence, this has been a fascinating conversation for me. I'm going through an evolution with Kristina on this whole the body side of things, and I find it very fascinating. It's been kind of a hole in my experience, and having you on has really helped fill it in.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with both of you, and I've enjoyed watching your show
Thank
over the past few
you.
months. You guys know I love your connection and collaboration and how
Aw,
you work
thank you.
together. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I've been
Okay,
really loving our so thank you for everything. I'm glad you were on today.
Thank you. Keep up the good
we'll
work.
connect
I'll keep
again
following.
soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.